Welcome back, dear students. So let's get quickly started with the expressions language. We just finished, date formatting and the essentials of expressions language in JSP. And today will be after the number formatting, we'll continue with date formatting, right? So let me show you the way we format date is the following, right? We know that we call FMT, which in turn is the prefix for the core library, which is tag lib. You can even use it directly. For example, if you want to use the core library, you can use tag lib, and you can use the prefix C for the core tag directory, which is JSp-GSTL core, right? So that is going to be prefixed as C, and FMT as usual is going to be used. Either you can hit control space, right? It's automatically going to be included, right? And for that you are going to use format date, and for FMT you are going to use JSTL-FMT. I'll again show you the URL, right? So this is here, http javasun.com JSP-GSTL/FMT, right? So this is for formatting and this is for JSTL. Okay. Now we have to format the date, right? And let's say we are going to make a variable here, format date, or we can first say FMT, forget it, c.set, right? And the variable name is going to be date, right? And it's going to be, and the value is going to be value. What is the value? It's going to be new java.util.date, right? So we are going to import it, java.util.date, right? So we are not importing it. Even if you want to import it, you can import it right now. So this is set. What we can do now is format it. So to format, we can use FMT/format date, right? And type is going to be time. I just want to get time only, right? And if I want to get only time, I'll say I need to get value of this date, right? Okay, and now let us see what do we get in turn. All right, so we are getting 1:55 p.m., right? So out of date, I want to extract only the time. So maybe at times you may only require to get time. So this is how you can extract time using expressions language and JSTL all together, right? Okay, this is, let's say, about by time, and let me hit BR and another BR, and let me just format by date, right? So let's say by date, and I will say type is equivalent to date. Now you're getting July 13, 2020, right? And if you want to get both, you can say type is equivalent to both. So you can even use this. So I will say by both, and you can say type is equivalent to both, and you can get the value as well. So by both, July 13, 2021 to 6 p.m. So this is how you can format dates, right? And now if you want to set the locale, right? For example, we used recently, or we can say yesterday, we used currency formatting, right? And for currency formatting, just let me, okay, now this is what we learned yesterday, right? All right, so let me show you again. So this is currency formatting, and let me hit BR and a BR, and let me have an h2 tag. to say date formatting, right? And here what we are going to do, we are going to format the date. All right, so this is date formatting and this is the currency formatting. And if you want to set the locale means the culture, right? You can set the culture and the language by using the fmt format dash locale. So that is set locale value is equal to, for example, we have New Zealand, NL means New Zealand, right? So you can clearly see that the currency does not have dollar now, right? So you can use EN-US, so to get dollars, maybe, no, yeah, we're getting dollars. And for India, there's IN_IN expose. No, let me Google LOCAL, locale for India. The locale for India is EN-IN, right? So I'll be using the same locale here, EN_ or maybe underscore, yeah. Now we are getting rupees. Now you can clearly see locale changes the time also, and it changes everything that the formatting has to do with, be it currency or be it the time, which is GMT. Here we're using Kolkata, right? So you can set the locale and your amount and your date is going to be formatted as per the locale that you have already set, right? Okay, is that done? So this concludes your EL, or we can say expressions language, which is, it's going to be a fun, right? If you develop a software and tend to, let's say, about learn technologies like EL to work with different type of, different type of, we can say, softwares using expressions language and even many different things, right? All right. So now our next topic is going to be, just let me just see this. Just wait a second. Filters we are done with. Regular expressions we are done with. Just a moment, I'll see the syllabus and come back. Alright, so the next topic is going to be servlet events and listeners. Servlet events and listeners, right? So we are going to continue with the servlet events and listeners. And what are the servlet events and listeners available? That is SERVLET, servlet, context event, and we have HTTP session event. So whenever a servlet is loaded, context is written. Whenever a session is started, session event is called. Whenever a request is made, so servlet request event, when a request is made, a servlet request event is called. Servlet context attribute event. So these events we are going to learn today, right? And they're going to be really good and we're going to have fun working with them. Also, let me show you these events first, right? And let's continue with those events, right? Okay. So there are two methods of servlet context listener: context initialized and context destroyed. So let me show you both of them, right? And how do you go ahead with that? Let me make a new class right here for example, right? So let me go to source packages DAO and let me make a new JSP class right here. Call this as my listener, right? So we call this as my listener. So, and this my listener is going to now implement an interface. Alright, servlet. So I'll say servlet it implements servlet context listener, right? And it's going to overwrite two methods from the interface servlet context, which is context initialized and context destroyed. So whenever a context is initialized, what do you want to do when a context is initialized? All right, so I'll say whenever the servlet context is initialized, all right, so let's say context. So I will use this servlet context right here. Right, servlet context event SCE. So I will say whenever the servlet context is initialized, so I will say servlet context, right? So servlet context CTX is equal to this servlet context event dot get servlet context, right? So I'm writing to the context of the servlet, so I'll say CTX dot set attribute. All right, so let me make a connection here. So I'll say connection con java.sql.connection is equivalent to db. So I can say db context if you want to initialize it, right? So you can say db context dot connect, and we are passing c. Or what we can do right here, we can make an entire connection right here and set that connection to the servlet context. So let me show you how do you set it. All right, we are writing to the servlet context here, so it's very important. So for example, I'll just make a connection, right, to this database right here, and I can do that as well. I can set it to the servlet context as well. So but here we are setting simple things. So I'll say I'm setting to the servlet context any different thing, because whenever context is initialized, so this particular thing is going to be called, right? So I will say testing context, right? Or we say the key is TC and it's going to be testing context. So we're setting it to the servlet context, right? So that's it. So whenever the servlet context is initialized, this attribute is automatically set. This is automatically called. You don't have to call it explicitly. So whenever context is destroyed, there is something that you want to do, right? So you can set. That means these are servlet event handlers. The first event handler, we are doing context, that is the servlet context. I've said servlet context event listener. So whenever context is initialized, we are setting an attribute to the context, that is TC, testing context. That's it. And it's nothing, I mean, magical happening right here. All right. So once you have done it, all right, you can see this. I'll go back to my ES, or you can go to my EXP sample. So I'll just delete everything right here. Right, and I'll do one thing. So I'll call this EXP servlet, which we have made yesterday, right? So there's nothing now in the get, right? So I'll call this whenever the servlet context is initialized. I'll say response dot set content type is going to be text/html, all right? And let's say print writer out is equal to response dot get writer, all right? And we will call servlet context. So I'll say servlet context. So let's call this servlet. So I'll say servlet context CTX is equal to get servlet context, all right? And I will say out.print ctx.get attribute, and the name of the attribute that we had set is testing context. No, it is basically TC. The context that we have set is TC, so we are printing the TC out. All right, so let me start it again. All right, So it's exp. Now the servlet context exp. Alright, so we're still getting null here, tc. Servlet context ctx is equal to sce. Okay, dot sce dot get servlet context. We're retrieving it. Just a moment. Alright, so we're not doing anything right here actually. Just a moment. CT, that's how the CT is or set attribute. Yeah, that's absolutely good. We don't have any problem in here. So basically there are two methods declared in the servlet context listener interface which must be implemented by the program, right? So we're implementing both. When the application is deployed on the servlet, context initialized is called, right? So let's say we're deploying this application now, right, and deployed. All right, so we can call exp to give us the servlet context ctx.set. Oh, why are we doing? Yeah, we have to do set attribute, and here we have to do get attribute. Servlet context ctx is equal to get servlet context. So we should be able to get it, right? Why aren't we getting it? Just a moment. So get servlet context. We should be able to get a servlet context. Sol.print. Right, response.get writer. So ctx.get attribute. ctx.get attribute is testing context. So we should be able to get it, right? I don't know, something wrong. So let me see this right here. Alright, so where is this exp sample? Let me take this to the default package because we have just, okay, default package is exp sample and it has my listener as well. So let me redeploy this and seek the context right here. Alright, so I may have to redeploy it. So for that I may have to, because the application has already been deployed, so I'll just do clean and build so that we redeploy the package. Alright, so once we are doing clean, okay, now we'll redeploy the package because the context is written when the servlet is initialized, right? So that's what we are expecting it. Okay, so it's already deployed, I suppose. Okay, let me basically try and get see, my listener is here. It's in the same package, so we are using context initialized. Servlet context is equal to c.get servlet context ctx.set attribute tc, which is testing context. So we should be able to get testing context. I don't know. Why aren't we getting this? Just a moment. Let's say, for example, we are using a database initialization code. Okay, so for example, we are initializing a database. Okay, persistent. So we have this right here. Let me initialize this connection there first. Okay. Okay, I'll go to my listener again and I will use this try catch block to get connected to the host JDBC, which is localhost/3306, and then we have the username for the database, maybe, right, and we have the password. So how many parameters? Let me just catch the exception. Do not return anything. Alright, so I'm getting connected with MySQL localhost 3306. And what is the database name? Let's say about we are going to get connected with FS project, right? And I'll use FS project, and the name is root and the password is blank, right? So now we are getting connected with this. So what I do right here, so I'll go to the try block and I'll say I'll initialize the servlet context. And what I will do right here, at the time when the context is initialized, I will set the context right here, right? And what I do right here, so I call this as connection con, and I'm setting as this connection is going to be set as this con, which is right here. Alright, so that means whenever you initialize, deploy the package, the database connection is already made, and you can ask servlet context, right? You can ask for the database connection whenever you want. Just go to the servlet context and ask for the database connection. Okay, redeployment is done, and I'll go to exp. We're still getting null because we are not getting. Alright, so now what we have to do is ask for the connection which is con. Hey, you mind if you give me con, right? And we're asking, maybe we'll have to redeploy it. I'll just close it down so that I redeploy. Alright, there were many things that we had not done yet, so I forgot. So let me just tell you once again. So whenever servlet is initialized, context is initialized. So what are we going to do? The first things first, we will make a new let's go to source package and make a new package and call this listeners, right? So we call this as listeners, and I'm going to drag and drop the my listener class into the listeners package. That's the first things first, right? So I'll go back and open my listeners package, and here's my listener class. And whenever the context is initialized, listener is called. So what I do right here, I'll say out dot print, just to print. So how do you do out dot print? Just a moment. So the context. Yeah, we have to do system.out.print. So I'll say system.out.print connection initialized. Right? So connection initialized. All right. And now what we have done, we made this servlet listener, or we can say we have made this class my listener that implements servlet context listener interface, which is automatically going to call this connection or going to make this connection and set it to the context, right, whenever this servlet is deployed, right? So this thing is done. The second thing that we have to do that I forgot was the main thing. We'll go to the web.x file, right? And what are we going to do inside this web.xml file is the following things, right? So number one thing that we are going to do here is describe the listener. So I'll go and I'll say, hey, we are going to use listeners here. So I will use the listener tag. So I'll close the listener tag and I'll define the listener class here. So I'll say I will be using the listener class which is in the package, right? So which is going to be inside the package listeners, and we have the listener here known as my my listener. Right, so that's it. What you have to define, you have to just define your listener. I'll just reload it. So some problems, so I'll just go ahead and check. Package name is listener, and I will use the same package, that is listeners, and the class name is my listener, right? And I suppose this should do the job, right? And we don't have to do anything else, right? And it is going to be the servlet context listener, and yeah, I suppose it should, this should do. I'll just rebuild and reload. Alright, now I'll go to exp. Alright, so we get a null pointer exception right here, and the null pointer exception is as of, okay, so just let me get rid of these things right here and go back to listener. The con is capital here, you can see, right? SC is the servlet context dot set attribute con as capital, so we're using small con here, so I'll just use capital, and I will say statement, right? So I'll say statement, statement stat is equivalent to, right, con, which is the connection dot create statement. I'll say stat dot execute query, which is going to be select star from students. So select star from students, right? So this is done. It's magic codes, I suppose. Yeah. Alright, so I can now say result sets rs is equivalent to, so we'll say while rs dot next, right? So I'll say out dot print rs dot get string user name, I'll say plus br, and that's it. Alright, so we are getting Fahim Khan and Zia Malik, so there are only two users. You can clearly see how are we asking servlet context about the connection. We say servlet context ctx is equal to get servlet context, right? Ask the connection. We know since that we are doing ctx.get attribute con, which is connection, that's why we have to typecast the requested value back to the type of connection. It's called as typecasting, casting to the appropriate type, right? So now this database connection is automatically initialized when you deploy the application. Now you can ask the connection, you can ask your database about the connection any more, or we can say any time when necessary. Seek connection whenever you require it, right? So this is how we are using. So let me just make this my listener more appropriate, right? So it is servlet context listener, so I'll have to refactor. It's actually servlet context listener, right? All right. Okay, basically I have renamed both our servlet context listener and say rename, so servlet context, so I'll say servlet-context list, or we can say servlet context, let's say only servlet context list, right? Or we can say context listener. listener. So this will do. I'll say only context listener. So there should not be any fight anymore, right? Because context listener is different and we're implementing on servlet context listener. Earlier both were same. And here also I'll go to the context listener. Yeah, absolutely right. We'll refresh and now you can see that your context listener is working as expected. So that is the first thing, right, that we had to do. How many listeners do we have to see and how many listeners do we have to learn today are the following, right? And number one is servlet context event. So it's done. HTTP session event, which we will do. Servlet requested, servlet contribute. We can say attribute listener, right? So these are the listeners that we have to complete and we have to learn across, right? Okay, now the second thing that we are going to do is let's say about we are going to make another listener, which is going to be maybe the session listener, right? All right. So session listener. Okay, let's go with HTTP session listener. So I'll go to the listeners. I'll go with new Java class. So I will say session listener. So I'll make this session listener class. And this is going to implement HTTP session listener. So implements HTTP session listener. All right. Okay. Implement. So now session created. What do you want to do when the session is created and what do you want to do when the session is destroyed? So as simple as anything, right? So anything that you want to do when the session is created and anything you want to do when this session is destroyed, right? So let me just use this here. Alright, so whenever the session is created, what I want is let's say servlet context. Alright, let's do two simple things. So let's not do this. Whenever session is created, what are we going to do? I will say system.out.println. So we will say, let's say about session created, right? Which session is created? So for that we'll concatenate. I'll say SE, which is this HTTP session event dot get session dot get. I can get attribute name or you can get ID. So which session is created? Alright, and when the session is destroyed, alright, so we'll do this. So we will say session destroyed, and which session is destroyed? So we'll use the same session destroyed, get session ID. So this is going to be fired when the session is destroyed, and this is going to be fired when the session is created, right? Now, so this is how this is automatically called whenever you create a session. So I'll go with listeners. I will add one more listener right here, and the listener is going to be session listener in the same package, which is listeners right here. Right, so we have session listener and context listener. So session listener is now here. So we are going to use the same session listener. Let me go back to example.jsp. Let me get rid of all servlet context.cts.get servlet context. So we don't have to do this right here. We don't have to ask context anything, right? So we will just simply say so So let's say login. So we are simply going to login because we're going to call whenever the application is deployed, right? So because you are asking about certain things, so let me go ahead and redeploy the application and do a clean and build. So once we log in, we'll see whether the session is created or not, and once we log out, we'll see whether the session is destroyed or not. So I'll go to student login, right? So Fahim Khan, and password is password. So try and log in. I log in is successful. Glass session created, and the session ID is right here. Now you can clearly see, right, whenever session is creating, you are commanding, you are guiding, and you are using the session create, you can say interface. So that means you are using your own code. You want to do certain things when the session is created. Maybe you want to authorize something, maybe something, right? But you just need to know that something can happen automatically without even you calling it when the session is created. I can clearly see that I just made login. We made it maybe a couple of months back, but yeah, still now my session is pending session created, and I'm getting the session ID which session was created. So let me log out. So once I log out, the session is destroyed. So let us see whether we get that or not. Alright, go to Glassfish. We have not destroyed the session. Basically, we have unsetted the session. Alright, so let me go back to profile. Yeah, you're not authorized. So let me log in. Alright, so you go session created right here. Okay, it's done once, only once the application is created. For example, if I go ahead, application, and I just remove this session, right? So let me remove the session, go back to the main page, and you can clearly see session destroyed and the name of the session destroyed, and then we recreated the session, right? And you can clearly see both the things are happening. So this is how we can handle the session event, right? So now we have request listener whenever request is made, right? So let's make a request listener. So I'll say new Java class. So I'll say servlet request. Is the recording on or off? Yeah, it's on. Servlet request listener, right? Or we can say, yeah, servlet request attribute listener. So this is the class name, and this class is going to extend from, or not extend from, sorry, implements, right, servlet request attribute listener, right? And we have to implement all the abstract methods. So what are the abstract methods? Whenever you do request.add attribute, right, you do remove attribute and you replace the attribute. So let's see what is going to happen when you do these things. And before that, let me go and paste this right here. Call another listener in the web.xml, which is the deployment descriptor. So here I reference another listener or event handler, right? And now what is going to happen? So I'll just say this. I'll say system.out.println, right? Let's say about request request attribute added. Which attribute was added? So we will say the object of request attribute listener, right? And I can create an object here. I use the same object dot get name, right? So I'll just use this right here. Request attribute added, request attribute removed, and the request attribute replaced, right? So we have added, removed, and replaced now, right? So since the application is now again deployed, let's go back to example, right? And I'll simply say, okay, let's say request request get request.set attribute, let's say about test, and we say hello baby, right? So this is what we are going to do. Once we call this URL exp, let's go back to the console, right? So let me just clear everything here. All right, so exp is loaded, delete it. Okay, now I can clearly see request attribute added test. Now the test request attribute has been added, so the spelling is mistaked. Request attribute added, so request attribute removed. Alright, so let me try again and go to exp. Alright, we go back and see request attribute added. What if you want to remove this attribute? Right now, if I want to remove this attribute, let's say in example, or we can say exp.java, right? So I'll just go open scriptlets right here, and I'll say request.remove attribute, and that is test. I want to remove this attribute. So let's see now. What do we get? Output glassfish, request attribute added test. Now if I go to exp.jsp, now we should get a request attribute added. It should show us remove test. So I don't know why isn't this getting called. Okay, request attribute removed and replaced. We should get it. I don't know. System.out.print request attribute. Why don't we do in the same file? So let's say we'll remove also. Alright, so let's not do it here. Okay, T is capital or small? It's small or capital, doesn't matter. So after it's being displayed, so I'll say request dot remove attribute test. So now let us see whether we are getting removed and we are getting both. So let's say clear. Right, let's load exp. Request attribute added test, and it's automatically called now request attribute removed test, right? So let's try and replace it now, right? So I will say request dot set attribute test to something. Also I'll set it to something else. Just copy and do the same. Go back and check the console. Right, request attribute replaced. Now you can clearly see, I'll just say we should get added and replaced. Request attribute added test and request attribute replaced. What do you mean by replace? You're resetting it, right? Test, first test had hello baby, now test is having something else. Now this is where the request attribute listener is again called, right? Okay, attribute listener. So let's see the context attribute listener. The last but not the least is going to be the context servlet context context attribute listener. So I've called this as context attribute listener. Immediately go and call the listener here. Right, so I'll copy, paste the context attribute listener. All right, so now the reference has been created. I will go and say implements Servlet context attribute listener. So we are handling the servlet context attribute listener. Attribute added, attribute removed, and attribute replaced, right? So whenever you add an attribute, right, not to the request, right, it's not, it's basically the context.set attribute is going to work like the same. Instead, what you have to do here, instead of using request.set attribute, you'll have to say servlet context ctx is equivalent to get servlet context, right? And you can say ctx dot set attribute, and you will say same, right? So you can use this test, and you can use the value hello baby, right? So you can see now we can use the same to display right here. So let me say whenever the attribute is added to the context, what do you want? I want this to happen, event, which is this event, right? So I'll say context attribute added. All right, so that's fine. So I will say remove context attribute removed, and we can just handle these events as context attribute removed and context attribute replaced, right? Is that so? Fine. All right then. Let's carry on. Go to exp, load it, go and clear the cache, and now we'll see the context attribute should be added, but we're getting an exception. Okay, it's basically arg0, so I'll see. Alright, sorry. Alright, so let's go ahead and clear the console, check, yes, context attribute replaced test. Now you can clearly see that you're getting context attribute has been replaced, right? And you can even see the context attribute has been added, right? So we'll say testing hello baby. Now what do we get? Context attribute added testing. So now can we do this now? So I'll do the same. So I'll say replaced and removed. So I'll say set attribute, right? Testing hello baby again. So it's going to be replaced, and we will say ctx dot remove attribute testing testing. So which is again in front of you. So we should get all three of them, right? So we should get right added, replaced, and removed, right? You can clearly see now we have seen the following things, right? So following event handlers, which are automatically called when a certain event happens. What is a certain event? Whenever you do request.set attribute, an event happens. You want to do something there, right? You can do. All right, session.set attribute, you want to do something there, you can do, right? Request.set attribute, you want to do something there, you can do. And for that, we use listeners with the servlet context listener, servlet context attribute listener, which is again context.set attribute, servlet request attribute listener, which is request.set attribute, right? And servlet session listener, which is session.set attribute, and each and everything. So this is all about events and servlets, right? So do practice very hard. Let me know if there is something that I can help you with, but yeah, you need to practice this before we come with the next class. We are going to jump in and we're going to get one after another class, so you need to be, you need to be quite sure about all these things, right? And you need to practice it very hard, right? And I wish you guys all the very best, and I wish you complete all the assignments. And this is what your assignment is going to be, practicing this, and that's all what you require before the exam, right? So if you practice what's being taught to you, you'll inshallah pass the examinations with great numbers and good numbers, right? Do practice hard, pray for me, right? Bye bye, take care, see you tomorrow.